All right, I think we're going to get started. Hi, my name is Darcy, Darcy Smith. I work at League of Geeks as a community manager. I'm the solitary community manager at League of Geeks, and we are roughly 20 people or so. As far as you're concerned, our main priority at the moment is Armello, which is our game that came out in 2015. So Armello is an interesting beast. You've probably heard way too much about it already. But what you might not know is that we just uploaded or updated the game to v1.9. So we've been updating Armello with free content over the last few years to maintain it as a service, essentially. When people buy Armello, we don't want them to just get a game that they play and then forget about. We want them to experience all of the updates that we've implemented over the course of the game, the life of the game, and then also more content moving forward. So what that means is there's a lot of information about Armello that comes through the pipeline. So we need to have a constant discussion, and the game as it is constantly in flux. So there's a lot of discussion that happens. I guess a little bit about me, just to put it in context. I am what I like to consider a design-centric community manager. Basically, that means that I use the community's voice to justify what I want to happen in the game, and hopefully we're in sync. Or maybe they're using me, I can't tell anymore, it's hard. And I want to preface this whole talk with the fact that I am very lucky, and just the fact that I have a Caucasian name means that I will be treated differently to other people on the internet, essentially. Is there music playing?
I think, yeah, the piano.
Right on. I'm going to roll with it. So just take it all with a grain of salt in the sense that I might not experience what another person might experience. And this is heavily influenced, my perspective is influenced by my experience, obviously. I guess I want to preface as well, I've been working with people in complaints and community management and customer service for about 8 years now, I think. So I'm extremely jaded, and a lot of the time it'll be very technical. I'll be talking about people's behaviour in a very analytical way, but I'm not really trying to say that humans are a resource, but for my first point, humans are totally a resource. So the perspective of your company is a resource, or not, depending on how you slice it, or depending on how optimistic you want to be. Humans are not a resource as well, so take that as you will. But what this talk is really about, essentially, to boil it down to the core essence, and everything I'll say trickles back into this in some way or another. I'm going to be talking about obtaining and providing value from community discussion. And that discussion, specifically, I'll be talking about forums, reviews, Reddit, and Facebook, Twitter to an extent, but it's mainly areas where people discuss your game, and you can discuss it with them. You can obtain information from them, you can provide information. It's a back and forth that should hopefully be active if you've got a good community. Extra synergies that this talk will be relevant to. If you have a game that has active community hubs already, essentially areas in which you've created or have developed organically by just people banding together, that people are already communicating in. If you don't have active community hubs, you need to make them in order for this to be relevant. It's also extremely important that you have a regular flow of information. If your game is like a fire and forget, like you make a game and then you push it and you're on to the next thing, 100% resource switch, it's definitely relevant to get involved during periods of communication, but long term, the bang for buck fades, essentially. And also a manageable community, and this means primarily size. So, there's no point if I was a solitary community manager for Blizzard, there's no point in me getting into the forums and talking to people about how cards work in Hearthstone. That's not a good use of anybody's time for that sort of scale. And luckily, in my situation, I think it is a good use of our time, and it might be more relevant to indies. So why? Why dedicate your time to this sort of behaviour? Why dedicate your time to reading what people are saying about your game, discussing with each other, and why should you care and why should you contribute to that discussion? the main reason, or one of the reasons, is that discussion is marketing. If people are talking about your game, people are listening about your game. Basically, we've probably all played a game based on someone's suggestion. That's how I play a lot of my games, is one of my friends going, yo, dude, check this out, this is the best. And I'll be like, nah, and then another friend will be like, you got to check this game out, it's the best. I'll be like, oh, okay, well, 2 people said it, so that's cool. So if people are talking about your game, then people are spreading the good word, essentially. And it's important that you understand and sculpt that perception. If you're a part of that discussion, then you have an impact on what people are saying about your game. And if your game is, ideal situation, you kick your game off, everybody's super stoked and they only say positive things about it forever. This won't happen. This will never happen. This might happen, but it won't happen. By getting involved in the conversation, you can basically stifle misinformation, keep your finger on the pulse of what people are saying, and you can promote healthy and positive discussion. And when the conversation's healthy and positive, you can obtain actionable feedback and data. So if we understand that a game is never a perfect thing and we're always striving to update it and improve it and change it, we're going to need constant feedback. You're going to need testing, and the glorious thing about a game as a service is that you constantly have people playing your game, and you constantly have testers, essentially, who are the people playing your game live. I'll show you a little bit more about how we can convert or create data later on in the talk as well. And the last aspect of getting involved with your community is honour. If you want to run a company, you can run a company and not talk to your customers, or you can talk to your customers about the products you're selling. It's a value thing. If you don't want to, that's up to you. You can totally not talk to your customers. But I guess when I got into games initially, I got into games with the dream that how cool it would be if I could talk to developers about Pokemon that I was catching. And they can do that. Our community can talk to us about the games that they're winning in our Mellow, and that's pretty cool. So what we're trying to craft is the perfect community member. We're trying to encourage the perfect community member to have a voice, and we're trying to forge the perfect community member from imperfect community members. And through marketing your game, you can make, I guess that the aspect of a perfect community member is that they're aware of your existence, and that's why we market our games. They think you're awesome, and that's why we sculpt their perception. They have great communications, and that's why we sculpt the conversation. And they believe us to be trustworthy, and we have a rapport with them, and that's why we are honourable, essentially. A good community is essentially a good game. If you have a large group of people talking about your product, then your game is probably good. And that's sort of a mantra that I try and work by, at least. It's pretty simple, I guess. So getting into the nitty-gritty of what we're doing when we're discussing and communicating with people that in our communities. We're basically interpreting, engaging, and striving for value in both of those actions. Interpretation is the act of obtaining information about what's being said about your products. Engaging with them is getting involved in the discussion and presenting information. And value is, I guess, what it's all about, the end result. We're going to talk about each of these topics, interpretation, engaging, and value in detail, but we'll start with value. I know I started with the last point in that sentence, but I can do that because this is my talk and everything's chaos. Value is basically a diverse and vague word. It can be used in a bunch of different situations and basically explains positive or valuable experiences. So one side of it is for the participants, value for the participants involved in the discussion. And this means people that aren't you, essentially. For the poster, essentially, the most obvious way of communicating the value for a participant is if someone goes, hey, my game's not working. And you go, hey, update your drivers. And they're like, cool, it's working. We've created value for that individual who's reached out to us. Another, I guess, situation is where someone goes, hey, I've got this idea for your game. And we go, that's a cool idea. That's valuable because we've validated their experience. So I've got a little example, and I've littered these examples through the talk as we go. So it's something as simple as going, hey, this is like someone going, hey, this is wrong, and we go, hey, that sucks, here's the solution, or ask for more ask for more information, and they're stoked. I signed off as Darcy on this post, and this person addressed me as Darcy Smith, so they're aware of who I am personally from the efforts on the forums. Hopefully this person, having Armello as their picture on Steam, will remember the fact that they've spoken to a developer who's sitting amongst the team and talking to them specifically. They'll value that, and they'll remember that. So value for you, the developer. This is as obvious as obtaining and collating feedback, and listening to feedback, getting information from people, and then converting that into future design or guiding future design, and making sure that you're not making any huge mistakes. I've got a good example for this, is someone on the forums hitting us up going, hey, for fun, I've mapped the outcomes of attacks versus defenses in your game, and then we can look at this data in, I guess, in our own time, and they've just taken their own time to provide us with a different window of looking at the numbers of our own systems, of our own design. And that only strengthens our design moving forward, because they've gone, hey, this is this data. And I mean, this is obviously an extreme point, but if you've just got random people in the world like trying to present information to you in, I guess, the slightest, the most lazy way that they can do this is going, hey, your game sucks. And the best way they can do this is show you a graph of your own designs. And then the last the last factor of value is for the audience. Because we're talking about discussions in public places, there's a huge amount of value that that is imparted onto people that are just cruising by the conversation. And this is arguably the most important party in this situation, because the flippant comment that you make on a forum post is the thing that media are going to point to in an article. And it seems as soon as you drop your guard, as soon as you get lazy in your language or what you're saying, that's when people start paying attention. So you need to sort of remain vigilant and strive for value, and keep in mind when you're talking to these people that everybody's watching and everybody will be everybody will refer to what you're saying later. So yeah, treat it like an information bank. Assume that everything will be able to be found later, because they will find it. So this is another example. So this is an example of addressing the lurkers in the room, the audience, and trying to engage them in conversation. This is me, by the way. I feel like I was inspired at some point by the angry screaming man iOS icons for games, and I've taken that with Dave Grohl as my image. But the idea is that this post was specifically designed to interrupt a little feud that was kicking off that I saw happening, essentially, and how I did that was attempt to engage like an interesting design discussion about our systems, and engaging other people. I guess I saw like two people about to fight, and I like made a party around them, and that's like a sort of the most obvious way that I can think of in terms of engaging the passers-by. So just to summarize, we've got value for them, we've got value for you, and we've got value for everyone else. And these are not, I mean, things that you do and things that you say are not specifically for isolated parties. They typically cover all bases in different ways. And it's really important that you craft your language around that, essentially. And I guess understanding that a healthy community means a healthy game. Everything is really for you anyway. Oh yeah, so this is a cool example of a lot of different aspects of how the parties can intertwine. So this is, you'll see it's a positive review, and I actually found this yesterday, because their words are about a negative review, because it was a negative review, and they've converted it to a positive review. And they just basically, the general gist of what they're saying is that it's not worth their money. They go, your product is not worth my money, essentially. And how we basically handle a situation like this in detail is just purely, I guess, I provide them with a tool to work around the money thing. There's a method in Armello that allows you to basically make Steam funds. So I've given them the tool to figure it out, and I've just validated them. Like, I've just gone, listen, I hear you. It's fine. You don't think that it's valuable, and you know what? If that's how you feel, like, I hope you change your mind someday. And apparently they did, which is cool. And for them, they've changed their perspective, and I've provided them with a tool that's very tangible for them to take advantage of. I have provided us with a conversion, a review conversion, which is publicly viewable on our Steam page and affects sales and further opportunities. And I have provided the audience with both the tool and the story that we're nice people. And people cruise by these reviews and they pay way more attention than you would, I guess, assume at the start. So moving from value, let's talk about interpretation. So let's talk about interpretation a little bit more about like the language that's been used to talk about your game and what you can do with that. So we should constantly be trying to identify opportunities to add value through intervention. So the first thing that you want to be paying attention to when you're looking at discussions that happen on your forums or in public spaces is you have to ask yourself, is it valuable for me to intervene? Is it valuable for me to step in and have a conversation with them? I mean, if someone's already answered their queries, is it really worth your time to jump in? And I guess one thing that I've realized over time is that you don't want to be the lame mum who's like, if the kids are hanging out, you don't want to be like, hey kids, like over and over again, like intervening in every conversation. You actually need to give them like a little bit of breathing room. I can kill threads by just like posting like an opinion on it, because I guess they see a developer as sort of a higher authority. So it can stifle discussion. So it's really important to sort of know when to hold them and know when to fold them, essentially. Identify trends. Conversations in video games come in waves, and there's hot topics every month. Like, you know, loot boxes is a perfect example. Like, we're talking about loot boxes lately, apparently. That's a thing. So by identifying trends in your community, and you can see it. One thread will pop up, and then 2 weeks later, a thread on the same topic will pop up, and then a week later, another thread, and then there are 4 threads in one day. And by getting involved early and identifying these trends that seem to be popping up, you can more effectively create responses or arguments against these, especially if they're critical of your game. You can basically ride the wave of community discussion. By identifying trends, it basically allows your future work to be easier because you can prepare, essentially. Collate data. So basically, like, if some dude came to the forums and was like, "God, Transface sucks. Your developers are the worst." Like, I'm not going to pass that on to the team. But if I had a spreadsheet that showed that, 200 more people this week have mentioned that Transface sucks, then maybe we have an issue around the perception of Transface, is all. We don't, but it's definitely not true. But what I'm trying to say is that, I mean, one voice can be valuable if it's particularly articulate. But what's better is obsessively turning negative reviews into a spreadsheet. I'm fine, it's fine. So what I've been doing lately, by lately I mean this year, is taking all the negative reviews and reading them all, and marking down what topics they mention. This has been hugely valuable for us. So, I mean, the biggest points of pressure for us are the perception of DLC and RNG, essentially. And they come in waves, month by month, that one gets a little stronger, one gets a little weaker, and then we have like these weird, like, dark horses that pop up, and I'll start tracking them just out of interest. Like the final column, which is the last one that I responded to, or the last one next to responded, is like this weird perception that our AI is cheating, and nothing has changed in regards to that. But it just popped up the last month. Like a bunch of people started talking about our AI rigging the game, and that is absurd, but it's important that we know that people are saying these things so we can prepare for the future, you know? What if there's a new wave of like, we don't want RNG rigged? I mean, we don't even rig the RNG, but most other games do. Anyway, if it's a hot topic, we want to be ready for it, and this makes me feel secure, so this is why I do it. And also, like, with mentioning like RNG and stuff, like if we were about to go like, hey, let's turn our 6-sided dice into 12-sided dice, I'd be like, that's a terrible idea, because we already have so many complaints about RNG. Like, if one of the biggest criticisms of our game is RNG, like, why would we lean further into that when it's like the biggest problem topic for the perception of our game? And you might think that this is sort of pandering to audience, but it's just being aware. Like, there's no reason why we can't implement an RNG feature, but we should definitely be aware of the perception surrounding what we're about to implement. We should be trying to anticipate how people will react to anything we do. This is probably the biggest lesson that I can impart with you in terms of customer service and maybe community management. But how an individual feels is far more important than what they say. People will like put logic or try and match logic to how they feel about something. This is what they do. It's a weird flaw of humans. They'll be like, oh, that makes me feel bad. Why does it make me feel bad? This justification, like, and they'll do it. So now I've just got like another slide that says exactly the same thing but in bigger letters, so it like rings out. In fact, the whole rest of this presentation is just this slide in different formats, so get ready. It's important that you read between the lines. Like, what people say, basically when someone says, hey, this system sucks, well, you could trust them and assume the system sucks, or you could more intelligently sort of see that they've had a negative experience with that. You can argue with an opinion, but you can't argue with how people feel. And that's really important. This is kind of a hot topic for us. I didn't think so many people from Log were going to come to this, so sorry. Now you feel my pain. This is a time. So people say they want the fog gone from our game, and that is an opinion. But what they're trying to say is that they want a way to further obtain information. They want information to be more readily available to them, and they feel that the fog is obscuring that. So they're saying they want the fog gone, but no, they want a way to obtain more information. And the most logical way that they see that happening is removing the fog. It's important to read between the lines. So to summarize interpretation, basically understand how your community feels, not necessarily what they say. And try and understand how they feel as a community and less so as individuals. Make sure you thoroughly ask yourself whether it's valuable for you to engage in a situation or not. guide development with feedback. Whether it's one person's really good idea or whether it's the collective's opinion that you've put in a spreadsheet that should definitely exist. And prepare for future discussions to make your life easy. So let's talk about engagement. So once you have decided that it's valuable to get involved, like let's just talk about a few different things. It's probably a little harder to be concise in this topic because there are so many ways that you can engage in discussion. Language is an incredibly complex thing, and I can't tell you how to respond to people in a heap of detail because there are so many ways to skin a cat. Is that something that people say? Don't skin cats. And once again, don't be a lame mum. Overcome your ego. This is difficult. This is really difficult, especially when you come into work every day and you work on a game for years and years and years, and then some idiot plays it for an hour and goes, this design's terrible and you all suck. It's really hard to not go like, you suck, and like just get back on their level. It's hard. Like I fight it day in, day out, and sometimes I'm just like, nah, I can't do this, and just walk away. And sometimes it'll get the better of me too. And I think it gets the better of everyone to an extent. But we need to do our best to make sure you don't get stuck into these stupid arguments. Make sure you stay on the plane of a developer. Don't sink down to the level of terrible people, essentially. Terrible internet people. Control the tone. Make sure that people are speaking in a constructive way. And make sure that it's fun and helpful. Because if you control the tone, then you can more easily extract information from people, or you can more easily sort of relate to people if you put the tone in a good place. Don't kick into a flame war and basically try and explain a design principle if people are just like yelling profanities at each other. And this is another example I've got where I locked a thread. I stifled the conversation because it's garbage. We determined that the conversation is not valuable or constructive. So basically I tell them what the tone of the conversation needs to be moving forward. And sometimes you'll encounter these situations where you need to just stop and go, hey, this is not going to work. We can't talk in this environment. So, I mean, a good way in terms of forums is destroying or locking that conversation and saying, hey, if you want to discuss this topic, you do it on our terms. And you do it in a way that is helpful to everybody involved. All right. Validation. I touched on this earlier, but it's like the easiest way of basically making people feel good. Especially, I don't know, like, I don't know if it's like I think it's always been this way. Developers don't really talk to people, but they're too busy, right? Like, we're too busy the game director of, like, Mario isn't going to just, like, hang out on the forums all day. He's going to make Mario happen, you know? Like, so the fact that you're there at all is a hugely powerful tool. And validation is so easily imparted to people, especially people that are not being negative. Like if people are just discussing a game and you go like, hey, cool thing, and they're like, ho, 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 like they're so stoked. They're incredibly stoked because they're validated by someone that they potentially admire or at least like their work, you know. It's really easy. Here's an example of me validating people. Like there was a really good discussion kicking off about I think it was just like design ideas, I think, like card ideas and stuff. And yeah, no, it's a balanced thread, that's right, cool. So like they were all talking about which heroes are strongest, and in our Mellow it's like a really interesting discussion for us because people are so wrong, like compared to the data, like it's really good. And someone will rock up one day and be like, hero X is way better than everything else, and they'll be like, no, hero Y is way better, and they just butt heads about it, and like once again they're just trying to use their reasoning to supplement their feelings on the topic. And by chiming in and going, hey, these discussions are really awesome because we value the perspective, your perspective, then like it basically turned this small fire of a discussion into an inferno, and it kicked off like a huge thing. And people involved were like really hyped about this discussion now, because now they have the attention of the creators of what they're discussing, you know, which feels good. So I've got a little bit of a section here, which is the do's and don'ts of traditional customer service. Coming from a really corporate background, and I guess as human people that probably have bills and stuff, you probably called someone on the phone to sort of bill out, or like, I don't know, like hook up electricity or something. Like, we all know what it's like, and it's terrible. That's why I've done this, because it's very relatable, okay, everyone? Don't read from a script. It's very obvious. If you've got a handle on the internet and you're the sole community manager for a company, and you're the one that's talking the most in the community, if you use scripts a lot, then it's going to be super, super obvious. That said, yeah, you can read from a script. Like, but I can say what's not. I can say the opposite of what's there because I'm doing this talk. I'm allowed to. Have templates for sure, but modify them appropriately for each situation. And my rule of thumb is the more standard a question is, or a discussion is, the more you're allowed to give a generic response. If someone goes, hey, I hit a bug, and they do that, which is so weird. They're like, I got a bug. I'm like, what do you want me to do with that? I can't help you with that. So that's why, like, if they say, hey, I've got a bug, I go, here's how to submit a bug report, and I just copy and paste the thing. Because, I mean, they can barely explain what they're talking about, let alone Google to see if I've said the same thing to other people. So don't feel bad about it. Yeah, just tweak your copy and paste, make them tailored to the person. Something all right? Yeah. And that leads into mimic your audience. Humans do this naturally. It's a very fascinating topic. You'll be talking to someone and like you'll look down and your arms are crossed or folded. And then you'll look at them and their arms are folded and you're standing exactly like they am. Like, and you're jamming, like you're having a cool time, a good discussion, and you realise that you've just like fell into the same body language as another person. You can't do that over the internet, which is weird, or you can, but you just won't know, and it's completely chance. Anyway, you can try and match the tone of a room though, like, and you can use language that's appropriate to people that are in that room. And by matching your audience, you can more easily build rapport and more easily communicate. And sort of a more in-depth example, or an example of this is like, if people are joking around, joke around. If people are really sort of methodically analysing a topic, like give them some information that they think would be interesting. If people have like meticulously created a list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, respond 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like hit each of their responses. These little things, like even whether it's like sculpting the formatting of your post to be similar to theirs is like, will do wonders long term. Don't be difficult to contact. This is a huge thing in games. I don't get it, right? Like for customers, like typical industries like, you know, bills and that sort of stuff, like corporate customer service, you like call up and you wait and you press, like go through the teleprompter and it sucks. The whole experience sucks so badly. And then other developers, like larger developers who totally have the choice of making it easy to contact, like become contactable, don't do this. And an example of this is a game that I've tried to play lately, which I'll call Schmame. Like I went to their forums to like report a bug, and they have like a had players helping players thing, which is basically like, don't add us, please. Like, or you have to like navigate through a bunch of different FAQs to get to someone eventually. I guess it's hard. It's hard for a AAA or a huge studio with a huge audience. But when you're like a smaller developer, you have more of an opportunity to get involved and to go where your players are, and don't create these barriers. Like this stuff is very intentional and methodical to stifle people from communicating with you. But where possible, you know, try to avoid that, just for the sake of mankind. Acknowledge and avoid apologising. So this is a really sort of intricate detail of communication, essentially, especially for games. Like, if you apologise, you're actually putting yourself into a point of weakness. Like, you're putting yourself on a plane or a plateau that's lower than the person that you're talking to. You're relinquishing a sense of power. Acknowledge what they're saying. Like, be like, hey, it sucks that you had a rough run, or it sucks to hear you went through that. It's a very sort of intricate detail, but once again, it helps a lot. And also, like, don't be sorry. Just like, don't say it, but also don't feel it. Like, development's really difficult, and we're going to miss our dates, and we're going to mess things up every now and then. It's the chaos and nature of game development. So don't be sorry, and don't say you're sorry if things go wrong. Just like own it, I guess. Don't tolerate bullshit. In customer service, like working on the phones and stuff, you're not allowed to hang up the phone. Like, someone could be like, I'm going to kill you and your family, and you're like, have a good day. Like, it's bizarre. It's totally bizarre that you can be put in this situation where you can't, like, stand up for who you are, essentially. And for the sanity of yourself, and for the perception of you, like, you and your company, like, it's okay to push back. It's okay to tell people that they're out of line. And people will respect that in a lot of cases. Like, it's okay to show this personality, but you know, always feel free to bounce the responses off like colleagues, and make sure that you're on point, like, especially if things get heated. Like, if you need to start knocking heads, like, make sure you're justified, essentially. So I think I got an example here, which is kind of cool. This is where, like, a situation where someone was like, hey everyone, League of Geeks is stealing your data. Like, this is insane. It's like an outrage. Like, and they fully went to the forums and tried to do some huge expose on analytics, I guess. And they'd agreed to a EULA. And the second paragraph there, that's where ego probably got the better of me. I can say that it's a little unnecessary to be like, hey, how about you start taking this shit a little more seriously if you're going to complain about it. It's not super valuable for anyone involved. I don't think that they're going to be like, yeah, you know what, he's right. Because that doesn't happen on the internet. But also, I guess, although I dipped into ego land a little bit, I also tried to countermeasure it with like trying to understand where they're coming from. Like, once again, falling back on it's less important about what people are saying and more important about how they feel. So at the end of the day, this person felt like his security or his information was being used in a negative way, and it wasn't easy for them to obtain an answer. So they jumped to the conclusion that we were up to something malicious. But really, it's just I mean, this whole situation could have been avoided if it was really easy to pull out user agreements from Steam, and it's totally not. And after seeing this and going, like, first of all, this person's nuts. What they're saying is insane. But second of all, why has this person come to this point, and what's the problem here? We can better ourselves for the future. And even though, like, it's so easy to go, like, this person sucks, yeah, high five each other in the development team and, like, lock the thread and walk away. But I mean, it's better to stop that from happening in the future, potentially. So there you go. Knockheads. Yeah, uphold the values of your company. Hopefully they're exactly the same as your values, but not in all cases. You know, at the end of the day, you're working for a studio, and how you feel, much like the community making a comment, how they feel as individuals and how you feel as an individual is far less important than how you feel as a collective. And especially if you're not necessarily like the head of a company, it's really important that you make sure that your values are on the same page. Like, you want to be, if you're trying to provide value to others and obtain value for yourselves, it's really important that you justify what that value is, and quantify that to some degree. And you can only do that by discussing that with your team. And the last one is don't stifle personality. Something crazy they do in corporate customer service and stuff. It's like, hello, sir, how are you today? Like, you just strip it all back to this weird, like, ambiguous person. I find myself doing this, like, with talks and stuff. Like, I'll pick, like, when I was starting to do this, like, GCAP talk, I was like, we will talk about talking to people. And I don't know, like, I think people inherently, when they're representing a company or they're working, essentially, you feel the need to, you feel the need to take away the flavour. And that is the worst thing to do in this environment. If you're talking in a public forum, you should be fun and entertaining because people should want to listen to what you're saying. If people like you personally, they're more likely to like what you're saying. I know I said like 8 times then, but I still stand by it. So here's an example of me just like jumping into a situation. The thread seemed to be fairly lighthearted, but they're talking about something that kind of sucks. Apparently, like, people just like, basically like hid in their spawn point, essentially, and ended up winning the game anyway for a whole game, and this person was really frustrated about it. So I told them that we'd implement a cowed effect that reduces your win prestige, which is your win condition, to 0, and then it hijacks your Twitter account to notify your followers that you're about your embarrassing efforts to be the scummiest king of Armello. And then we call the offenders' mothers and tell them that what their child has done. Like, and obviously this is ridiculous enough for people to go like, yeah, he's just joking around. Like, and this is valuable. This is really valuable that we can be relatable and have fun. And it's also a sanity thing. Like, you don't want to sit around all day going, yes, thank you for your feedback. It's bullshit. You got to have a little bit of fun with it, and you get brownie points for it too. I have no idea where we landed in terms of time, but that's it. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Oh, that's pretty good. We got like about 5-7 minutes to take questions. If anyone has any questions, I'd love to hear them. Yeah.
With what you're saying about feedback and getting that from the community and stuff, how do you deal with the fact that generally the people that are actually active on the forum and stuff are generally a very small population of the players that actually play the game, and so their opinions might not necessarily reflect the opinions or the perception of the game as a whole?
That's a good point. Like, you have to be wary of the vocal minority. But that's kind of why the data tracking helps a little bit, because, you know, one person complaining about a feature can be meaningless. Like, people will literally complain about every aspect of your game because people are different and people have different values. So putting their opinions into something that's trackable and something that's tangible is probably the best way to get around that. Like, you would never change your perspective of your game or change your perspective of the community over one solitary comment. That would be insane. But I think to a degree as well, I wholeheartedly believe that the vocal minority sort of, they have to represent a group of people that aren't talking, right? Like, for every person that complains about something, there's definitely a person who just turned off your game and walked away. Like, they have to be sort of taken, seriously to a degree, but, you know, it's a case-by-case basis, and all you can do is just try and track the data and pay attention to what makes sense. I know that's kind of a non-answer, but it's all I got. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
I noticed in the spreadsheet you had like a responded to.
Oh, yeah.
That was obviously like pretty much empty for all the negative reviews.
Yeah.
Do you get much like response back from negative reviews? And also, like, if you do get responses, is there any sort of like turnover rate where that one, person put their review on? Is that a common thing?
I'm glad you asked, because I was looking at that, I was like, ooh, that looks bad. But I did this, I started responding to people, that was more recent. I think that was a snapshot of August. But before then, I took I think it was like June and July, I responded to every single negative review that we got, with the intention of just validating people and reaching out and sort of helping people if they have specific disputes or providing information to people that need it. And it wasn't, like, the conversion rate wasn't immediate. It wasn't immediate, and it didn't seem super valuable in terms of, like, actually changing people's opinion. Like, to me, it was more like, it was more of a planting a flag situation. It was more for the onlooker. Like, people don't like to change their minds at all on the internet, especially. So me contacting these people was more of a deterrent to others. And that was really hard to quantify. It was really hard to quantify, to go like, oh, well, this stuff is working. And it was a huge investment of my time to sort of invest. I guess reviews are such a tricky thing to respond to. So those responses take ages to forge. So, I mean, in terms of actually converting the reviews, it wasn't hugely valuable, but it's for the lurker, essentially. But yeah, I do it when I can, but it's just a time thing, essentially. Whatever. Yeah?
Do you have a greatest hits or a wall of fame or a wall of shame, and anything you're happy to share?
A greatest hits, they're kind of, it's interesting because I wish I could be like, yeah, there was this person that was crazy, but it's the hardest discussions, or the worst, like the greatest hits, they're really intricate dances of language. Like, I actually went back to some of the worst interactions that I've had with people, and the worst of the worst don't show well because they're so intricate and back and forth, and they're riding the line. Like, if someone's like, you all suck, I hate you, peace. Like, that's like the worst thing maybe someone can say. But like, it's the people that ride the line going like, well, I love your game, but I have a few insights about your design. And you're like, oh yeah, like, let's see how this goes. Like, and they actually, like, the worst people, like, bait you into spending time with them, and that doesn't show well on this screen, unfortunately. But yeah, the worst people are definitely the people that suck you into their awful tornado of grime. Yeah. Oh, it's like the lifeblood of our community, you know, like this sort of thing, the validation of people and in your community makes champions. Like, it makes people that will literally do your work for you. Like, you, by providing information and maintaining like a civil tone and praising people for good behavior and good language, like, you can create people that are just like powerful advocates and like huge forces. Like, we have a Discord for Armello, which is community run. And they maintain it like it's one of our communities. But I refuse to manage a Discord personally because I feel totally uncomfortable about like the fast-paced movement of it all. I can't moderate it, you know? Like, someone could be awful to someone else on in Discord, and it would disappear in the flow of like nightmarish garbage, but they banded together and say, we want this service. So now I just hang out in there when I'm available to, you know, like, and I'll just chime in randomly, or people can PM me. Like, the activating, this is, I guess I probably should have spoken more about activating community champions, but it's kind of like a huge topic within itself. Like, a lot of this talk relates heavily to that, for sure. Yeah. Yep.
Would you say that any platform in particular is like easier or harder to work with their community? Or?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, like console is so difficult because people that play on console, they're like, oh, I'm mad about this. Let me just put that down and boot up my computer. And like, and it's like, it's totally bizarre. Like, the contact that you have with like console players compared to PC players is like, console players are like distant and unreliable, and like they have these weird community hubs that pop up that are like console only even sometimes. Like, you need to like go onto like, it's way harder. Like, the fact that Steam has all of this stuff integrated into it means that people are conversing more about it. And our audience is primarily on PC, and PC mostly anyway, Steam mostly. So the vast majority of my time is spent on Steam. Yo.
Can you please pitch on Melody to me? I'm thinking about buying it.
You literally work for us. It's like Game of Thrones meets Kung Fu Panda or something. I don't know. Anything else? Cool. All right. Well, I think that's it. That's good time. I'll be outside if you want to say hey or whatever. Thank you so much.